Do you know the feeling when you realize you aren't a partner, but just an audience in your own life? When the man you married, who swore to build with you, is using a sledgehammer on a foundation he thinks is his. For me, that moment didn't come with strange perfume. It came with the new leather smell of his Audi and the transaction declined notification from my card. My name is Eliza. I am 34 years old, and for the last 6 years, I have been the perfect invisible wife. We live in a house of glass and steel in Cherry Creek, a monument to modern architecture and Marcus's ambition. From every room, Denver sprawls below, a glittering carpet of lights that always felt impossibly distant. Marcus, who is 38, loves this house. He loves the way the sunlight slices through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the Italian furniture he picked out. He loves the sharp, clean lines that offer no place to hide. He is a senior executive at Bridgeline Partners, a private equity firm that sounds impressive and, according to him, pays for this entire life. Tonight, the restaurant was loud. It was the kind of place where the dim lighting is meant to make you feel exclusive, but it only ever made me feel inspected. We were celebrating. Marcus was always celebrating. This time, it was a massive deal he'd finally closed. His friends, carbon copies of him in expensive, tight-fitting suits, were laughing too loudly, their voices echoing off the dark wood. I was nursing a glass of wine, the same one I'd been holding for an hour. And Eliza. Richard, Marcus's right-hand man, said, turning his slick smile on me, "What's new in your world, still selling those—" "What is it?" "Knickknacks." I felt Marcus's hand land heavily on my shoulder, a gesture that looked like affection but felt like ownership. "She's building an empire, rich," Marcus boomed, and the table laughed. "My wife, the Etsy tycoon." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial stage whisper. "It's adorable. She made almost—" "What was it? Honey? $1,000 last month." More laughter, sharp, brittle. I smiled. It's a smile I've perfected. It's bright, light, and reveals nothing. "It keeps me busy," I said softly. "I keep telling her," Marcus continued, waving his fork. "It's time to get a real job, actually contribute, help carry the load." He winked at the table. "This house doesn't pay for itself." The lie was so audacious it was almost impressive. The check came, placed discreetly in a black leather folder. The dinner was a business expense, of course, but Marcus always made a show of it. He nodded toward me. "Eliza, honey, you handle this." It was a test, a small, stupid power play. I pulled the joint credit card from my purse. The card Marcus monitors, the one tied to the account he funds, the one that gives him a detailed report of my every coffee, every tank of gas, every grocery run. I handed it to the waiter. I knew what was coming. The waiter returned a few minutes later, his face a mask of professional discomfort. He leaned down, speaking only to me. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. The card was declined." The table didn't quiet, but the energy shifted. I could feel Marcus's irritation radiating off him like heat. "Declined." He sighed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Eliza, what did you buy this time?" He didn't wait for an answer. He pulled out his own wallet, a sleek, black object, and produced the Amex, the black card, his savior complex in 3.5-inch form. "Here," he said to the waiter, dripping with magnanimous frustration. "Put it on this." He saved us. Again. I sat there, my face warm, my smile frozen. I endured the pitying looks from the other wives. I endured Marcus's heavy sigh as he signed the bill, the hero brought low by his frivolous wife. They didn't know. He didn't know. The Etsy shop isn't for knickknacks. It's not cute. It's called Terra Nova Collective. It's an anonymous, high-end e-commerce brand specializing in globally sourced, sustainable textiles. I built it from nothing. I designed the logistics, sourced the artisans, and crafted a brand identity so exclusive that high-end designers buy my fabrics without ever knowing my name. It's not a hobby, it's a corporation. The drive home was thick with his silence. The new Audi was too quiet, the engine a low hum that only amplified the tension. He finally spoke as we pulled onto the pristine, heated driveway of our glass cage. "We need to talk about your spending, Eliza." I kept my gaze fixed on the garage door as it slid open. My spending. The joint card. It's out of control. You can't just be throwing money around like that. I bought groceries, Marcus. "And gas?" "It's the principal!" he snapped, cutting the engine. "I'm under a lot of pressure right now. I'm trying to keep this family afloat, and I need you to take some financial responsibility. I'm tightening the belt. We all are. That means you need to cut back on the hobby. Whatever you're spending on that website, it stops." I unbuckled my seatbelt. The click was loud in the silence. "I understand." "Good." As he got out of the car, his phone lit up on the center console. A notification. I'm not proud that I looked, but I've learned to gather information where I can. It was a text. "Julian. You better have it. All of it." I felt a cold prickle. Julian. Not a woman's name. Julian was his supposed new contact, the one involved in this big deal. A shady, fast-talking man I'd seen him with once. A man who smelled of desperation and cheap cologne. I said nothing. I followed him inside, my heels clicking on the polished concrete floors. He went to the kitchen, pouring a whiskey I knew cost more than my first car. "I'm just going to finish up some emails," I said, my voice even. He grunted, already absorbed in the amber liquid. I walked down the hall to my home office. It's the smallest room, the one with the worst view, the one he gave me for my projects. I closed the door. The heavy, solid wood shut out the sound of the house. I turned the lock. The mask fell. The practiced smile evaporated. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. I sat at my simple desk, a piece I'd bought myself, and opened my laptop. Not the sleek silver one Marcus bought me for Christmas, but my own, the workhorse. I logged into my portal. Not the joint account, not the Etsy seller page, the real one. I clicked through the security protocols, my fingers flying over the keys. The portal for Terra Nova Collective's business banking opened. I looked at the number at the top of the screen. $3,104,500. I stared at it. The number I had built in secret, dollar by dollar, while he'd been calling me cute. The money I had made while he lectured me about the cost of groceries. He wanted me to cut back on my hobby. He was tightening the belt. I looked at that number, and the calm that had carried me through the night finally shattered, replaced by something much harder, much clearer, and much, much more dangerous. This financial firewall, this secret world I built, it wasn't the original plan. It was a reaction. It began 5 years ago, in this same glass house, long before the glass felt so cold and the views felt like a cage. I'd had an idea. It was just a kernel of what Terra Nova would become, a concept for sourcing artisanal textiles directly and selling them to a niche market. I was excited. I hadn't been excited about anything other than a dinner party menu in years. I pitched it to Marcus over dinner. We were sitting at this very table. The one he boasts cost $20,000. I outlined the market, the logistics, the potential. He didn't even look up from his tablet. "Eliza, babe," he said, and I can still hear that placating, dismissive tone. "You're brilliant at running this house. You are. But you just don't have the head for business. It's a cutthroat world." He finally looked at me, a soft, pitying smile on his face. "Why don't you focus on what you're good at? Just focus on managing our home. That's a huge job. Let me worry about the money." He patted my hand, a gesture of finality. The conversation was over. His contempt wasn't an insult. It was a release. It was the catalyst. 1 month later, My great-aunt Clara passed away. She was a woman I'd barely known, but she left me a small inheritance, $50,000. When the check arrived, Marcus glanced at it. $50K. That's cute, he'd said, tossing the envelope onto the counter. Pocket change, put it toward the club membership fees or buy yourself a new car, whatever. I smiled and said I would. Instead, I took that pocket change and opened a new bank account at a bank he didn't use. The next day, I filed the incorporation papers for Terra Nova Collective, LLC. I used an address for a virtual office box downtown. He never asked about the money again. He had dismissed it, just as he had dismissed me. But the real armor, the legal shield that allowed Terra Nova to grow from a seed into a fortress, was a document he himself had demanded. The post-nuptial agreement. It happened 3 years ago, right after his father passed away and left him a significant block of Bridgeline Partners stock. Marcus, the man who lectured me about contributing, suddenly became terrified that I might one day lay claim to his family assets. He came to me, his face a mask of solemn business practicality. "Eliza, we need to sign something. It's just a formality," he'd said, adjusting his cufflinks. "To protect my family's legacy. You understand. It's not about you. It's about protecting the assets for the future." He wanted to protect his money. From me. The irony was so acidic it almost made me laugh. "Of course, darling," I said, my voice as soft as silk. "Whatever you think is best." He hired his lawyers. I hired my own. I didn't hire a bulldog. I hired a quiet, older woman named Ms. Davenport, whose downtown office was filled with orchids and leather-bound books. She reviewed the agreement Marcus's team had drafted. It was, as expected, entirely one-sided, protecting every stock, every bond, and every future earning he might receive. Davenport smiled, a thin, satisfied smile. "He's an arrogant one, isn't he?" she murmured, looking over her glasses. "He's only focused on his own door. He's left yours wide open." She suggested a single reciprocal clause, a mirror. It stipulated that any and all income, assets, or equity derived from a separate business entity, established without the utilization of marital funds, shall be considered the sole and separate property of the originating spouse. Marcus signed. He probably skimmed it, his eyes landing only on the paragraphs that walled off his inheritance. He saw my clause, I'm sure of it, and he'd have laughed. He would have assumed it applied to my cute little Etsy shop, which, in his mind, was probably costing me money, not making it. He signed his financial death warrant, all while thinking he was the smartest man in the room. That's when I started the paper trail. Marcus was so proud that he paid for this house. Every month, he'd transfer a lump sum from his paycheck into our joint account, and the mortgage would be paid from there. He thought he was paying all of it. He wasn't. Every single month, for the last 3 years, I have also paid half the mortgage. I transfer the money directly from the Terra Nova business account to the bank, covering exactly 50% of the note. He only sees the other 50% leaving the joint account. He sees the paid notification and believes he's the provider. I see the equity statement. I see the wire transfer receipts. I have a clean, unbroken record proving my 50% contribution, funded entirely by my separate, protected property. It became so clear. In the cold, hard legalese of that post-nup, Marcus didn't want a partner. He didn't want an equal. He wanted an accessory. He wanted a beautiful, dependent, and utterly controllable ornament to display in his glass house. And in his arrogance, he'd given me the one tool I needed to build my own fortress right under his nose. My $3 million secret was secure, protected by arrogance and a post-nup. But a fortress isn't just about strong walls. It's about knowing when your enemy is desperate enough to try and tunnel underneath. I knew Marcus was arrogant. I needed to know if he was also dangerous. I needed a test, a controlled burn. The suspicion had begun about 8 months ago, long before the restaurant debacle. It started with the late-night phone calls he'd started taking on the patio. His voice a low, urgent murmur. He was always talking to Julian. His explanations were vague. A new venture, a high-stakes deal. But it felt wrong. The man I'd seen him with, this Julian, didn't look like a partner. He looked like a parasite. So, I did something I never thought I'd be capable of. I installed a keylogger on the shared family computer, the one in the main study. It felt like a violation, but I justified it. This was my home, my life. I had a right to know if there was a threat inside the walls. It didn't take long. The logs revealed a separate, secret email account. They revealed frantic, panicked messages from Marcus to Julian about making a margin call, about needing more time, about a hole he was in. And then I found the gambling site, online poker, high-stakes sports betting. Marcus wasn't just investing, he was losing. Julian wasn't his partner, he was his bookie, or worse, his creditor. Knowing this, I set my trap. It was 6 months ago. I created a separate account, a new one under my personal name, and transferred $15,000 into it from the Terra Nova funds. I printed a single bank statement. Then, I left it on the kitchen island, right next to the mail. Accidentally, Marcus found it that evening. He picked it up, his eyes scanning the single page. "What's this, Eliza?" "Oh," I said, my voice light, feigning embarrassment. "That's my savings, from the shop." He looked at the number. $15,000. His expression was a predatory mix of surprise and calculation. He'd never believed my hobby could produce a surplus of $15, let alone this. "This is all of it?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Yes," I said, playing the part of the proud, naive wife. "It's everything I've saved. I was going to use it to finally go to that big textile trade show in Milan next spring, to try and, make it a real business." He smiled, that same patronizing pat-on-the-head smile. "Milan, babe, that's a waste. That's just throwing money away on a vacation." He put the statement down. He put his arm around me. He said, his voice turning smooth, conspiratorial. "I have an opportunity, a really big one. Julian, you remember I mentioned him, he's got a sure thing. A bridge loan for a tech startup. It's a guaranteed 30% return in 60 days. He led me to the couch. He sat me down. He was in full performance mode. "Look at you," he said, tapping the statement. "You're a real saver." "But you're saving, Eliza, not investing. You're not making your money work for you. I'm proud of you for this." He kissed my forehead. "Let me show you how to really grow it. Let me take this seed money, and turn it into something real for us." I pretended to hesitate. I asked about the risk. "Risk?" He laughed, a big, booming, confident laugh. "Eliza, it's me. This is what I do. It's a sure thing. Trust me." 2 days later, I reluctantly agreed. I transferred the full $15,000 into our joint account. "You handle it," I said, my voice trembling with manufactured trust. "You're the expert." I watched from my laptop. I watched the keylogger. Within 24 hours, the money was gone. It wasn't invested. It was wired directly from the joint account into another account, one I didn't recognize. I Googled the routing number. It was a holding company I traced back to a name I now knew very well, Julian. He hadn't invested my money. He had used it to pay his debts. I waited 2 weeks. "Marcus," I asked one night, my voice full of practiced innocence. "I was just wondering about that investment. The sure thing, I was just curious how it works." He barely looked up from his phone. "What?" "Oh, that. Eliza, these things take time. The market moves. Things shift. You wouldn't understand the complexities." "Oh," I said, "it's just, you said 60 days. I just wondered." His head snapped up. His eyes were cold. "Are you questioning me, Eliza? Are you seriously questioning my judgment on this? I told you. You don't understand the market. You've got to be patient. Stop worrying about it." I'm handling it. Now, can we please just have a quiet evening? He was gaslighting me. He had stolen my money, given it to his shady partner, and was now blaming me for being impatient. I went to my office and closed the door. I knew. He wasn't just arrogant. He wasn't just a dismissive husband. He was desperate. He was reckless. And he was a thief. He had just committed financial fraud, willingly, against his wife. I saved the wire transfer confirmation. I saved the log of his panicked emails. The $15,000 was the best money I ever spent. It was the cost of confirmation. It was the price of my own freedom. And I knew, right then, that he would never see a single penny of the other $3 million. The next morning, I did not go to a yoga class. I did not meet the other wives for coffee. I put on a navy blue sheath dress, a structured blazer, and the kind of heels that click with authority. I drove downtown, not in the modest SUV Marcus let me use, but in a car I'd called, and walked into the lobby of the tallest, most severe building in the financial district. Ms. Davenport's office was on the 42nd floor. The woman who had drafted my postnup all those years ago had since become the single most feared divorce attorney in Denver. Her waiting room was silent, decorated in shades of gray and ice blue. The only art on the wall was a massive panoramic photograph of the Rocky Mountains in midwinter. It was cold, beautiful, and utterly unforgiving. When I was shown in, Ms. Davenport was standing at her own floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the same view. She was exactly as I remembered, impeccable, silver-haired, and radiating an intelligence that felt like a low-level hum. "Eliza," she said, turning. She did not use my married name. She gestured to the large, empty mahogany desk. "Please." I did not come as a scorned wife. I did not cry. I did not wring my hands and talk about his betrayal. I came as a CEO. I sat down, opened my briefcase, and began to place documents on her desk in neat, orderly piles. "This is the Articles of Incorporation for Terra Nova Collective, LLC, established 5 years ago," I said, my voice as level as the horizon. "So, this is the signed post-nuptial agreement from 3 years ago, specifically Article 4, subsection B, the separate property clause we drafted," I continued. "These are the full financial statements for Terra Nova for the last 48 months, showing a current liquid balance of just over $3.1 million. These," I added another pile, "are the wire transfer receipts from my separate business account to the mortgage lender, proving a 50% contribution to the house note for the last 36 months. Finally, I placed the last folder in the center. And this is the evidence of fraud. A printed bank statement for $15,000, which I presented to my husband 6 months ago. The corresponding wire transfer from our joint account to a third party, Julian Anson, and the keylogger transcripts and emails where Marcus admits to Mr. Anson that this money is to cover a gambling debt, followed by the text messages where he gaslights me about the investment." Ms. Davenport didn't speak for a long time. She sat down, put on a pair of sleek, black-framed glasses, and began to read. She started with the postnup. She lingered on Article 4, subsection B. A slow, thin smile spread across her face. It was not a smile of warmth. It was a smile of surgical appreciation. "Eliza," she said, finally looking up, her eyes sharp. "This isn't a post-nuptial agreement. This is a perfect trap." She leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. He was so focused on his own inheritance, so convinced of his own superiority, that he signed a document that gives you everything. He sealed his own fate. "He thinks I'm a dependent," I said. "He thinks he's going to tighten the belt on my hobby." "His opinion is irrelevant," Davenport said, dismissing him with a wave of her hand. "The law is what matters. And the law is entirely on your side. That clause doesn't just protect Terra Nova. It is Terra Nova, in a legal sense. It's an ironclad fortress he handed you the keys to." She picked up the mortgage receipts. "And this is the master stroke. By paying your half from your separate account, you haven't just earned equity. You've established a clear, undeniable financial contribution that bypasses the marital funds argument entirely. You own your half, free and clear. She paused, then delivered the legal twist. But it's better than that. He, I assume, has been paying his half from the joint account. Yes, I said. The one he funds from his salary. Marital funds, she said, the smile returning. Which you have a 50% claim on. Meanwhile, the keylogger transcripts suggest he's been leveraging marital assets the house for his personal debts. He's not just broke, Eliza. He's been actively commingling his bad faith debts with your good faith equity. I sat, processing. So, what do we do? I asked. Do I file, Davenport almost laughed. Absolutely not. You don't file, you don't do anything. He is a man digging his own grave. Eliza, our job is not to stop him. Our job is to let him dig until he hits bedrock. Let him commit more fraud. Let him leverage himself into oblivion. Let him continue to believe you are a fool. Do nothing. And in the meantime, she said, her voice dropping, all business. We protect the asset. We don't just win the war. We make sure the spoils are untouchable. She outlined the strategy. We weren't aiming for a divorce. We were aiming for a total extraction. We will create an irrevocable trust, she explained. We will move all intellectual property, the brand name Terra Nova, the supplier lists, the website domains, all of it into this trust. It will be so legally insulated that by the time he even hears the name Terra Nova, it will be a ghost. He won't be able to touch it, claim it, or even look at it. The goal was not to leave him. The goal was to make it so that when the time came, he would be the one left with nothing. I walked out of that office, the winter sun glinting off the glass towers. The plan was in motion. The goal wasn't just to be free. The goal was to gain absolute control before he even realized he was sinking. I followed Ms. Davenport's advice. I did nothing. I became the most supportive, understanding, and invisible wife I had ever been. And from that vantage point, I had a front row seat to the entire collapse. Life in the glass house became unbearably tense. The clean, open spaces now felt like an arena. Marcus was a ghost, pacing the halls, his phone permanently attached to his ear. He stopped celebrating. He stopped boasting. He just radiated a low-frequency hum of pure panic. He became irritable, snapping at me over the smallest things, the way the dishwasher was loaded, a light left on in the study. He was secretive, locking his office door, something he'd never done before. He was the one with nothing to hide, after all. The first real crack appeared in the mail. We had a joint financial advisor, a formality, as Marcus managed all serious investments. A statement arrived, and I opened it. It was a trade confirmation. Marcus was systematically selling off his Bridgeline Partners stock, block by block. The stock he had always called our retirement. The legacy he had protected with a postnup. He was liquidating his future, and I knew it wasn't for a new, brilliant investment. It was to plug a leak. Then came the second crack. A pale blue envelope, addressed only to him, from the financing company for his Audi. It was marked Second Notice. I saw it through the envelope's window. Your payment is now 30 days past due. He, the man who had lectured me on financial responsibility, was missing payments on the car he'd bought to celebrate a victory. It turned out that victory was a catastrophe. The massive deal he'd been celebrating at the restaurant, I pieced it together from the keylogger, from the frantic, one-sided conversations I overheard. It wasn't his money he'd invested. He had over-leveraged client funds, pouring them into some speculative real estate deal orchestrated by Julian. And the project had just gone bankrupt. He hadn't just made a bad bet. He had vaporized his client's money. Julian's calls stopped being discreet. He started calling the house landline, a line we hadn't used in years. I picked it up once, thinking it was a telemarketer. Marcus, a voice snarled, a voice I recognized as Julian's. You have 48 hours. I'm not kidding. You sociopath. You get me my money, or I'm going to Bridgeline. I'm going to everyone. I hung up, my hand steady. The shark was eating the other shark. That night, Marcus approached me. He found me in the kitchen, where I was calmly preparing a grocery list. He looked awful. His eyes were bloodshot. His suit was rumpled. He hadn't just lost his confidence. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. He tried to smile. It was a grotesque, painful grimace. "Eliza," he said, his voice trying for that old, smooth charm and failing. "Babe, we're in a bit of a tight spot." I looked up, all concern. "Oh no, is everything okay at work?" "It's just the market." He waved a shaky hand. "A temporary downturn. Cash flow problem? It's nothing, really. But we need to be a team on this." "Of course. Marcus. Anything," I said. "That's my girl." He put his hands on my shoulders. "Look, I know you love that SUV. I know you do. But it's just sitting there. We need to liquidate. I need you to sell it. Tomorrow. Just to help the family get over this hump." He wanted me to sell my car. The modest, paid-off vehicle I used for groceries and for transporting Terra Nova's first prototypes. "My car," I asked, letting a small tremor of worry enter my voice. His face hardened. The desperation was making him cruel. "Yes, Eliza, your car. This is the real world. This isn't your little online play-pretend store." He was breathing heavily. "It's time for you to grow up and face facts. I can't carry you anymore. I've been carrying this entire family, this entire house, you, on my back for a decade. And now I need you to step up, for once, and contribute something real. Sell the car. We need the money." He didn't just want my car. He wanted to humiliate me. He wanted to reestablish control, to remind me that his world was the real one, and mine was a fantasy. I'll think about it," I said, my voice small. He stormed off, enraged that I hadn't agreed immediately. But that wasn't the twist. That wasn't what made the timeline accelerate. The real twist came 3 days later. I got an alert from the credit monitoring service I'd signed up for under my own name. A hard inquiry had been placed on my file. Someone had tried to apply for a loan. I dug deeper. I called the bank, the one that held our mortgage, and navigated the automated menus until I got a human being. I used my most polite, confused housewife voice. "Hi, I'm just calling. My husband, Marcus, mentioned something about refinancing, and I just saw a strange alert." The loan officer was curt. "Ma'am, I can't discuss the details, but a formal application was made for a second mortgage, a home equity line of credit." "Oh," I said. "But I didn't sign anything." "Yes, ma'am," the officer said, his voice tight with professional disapproval. "We noted the lack of a cosigner's signature. However, the application was denied before it even got to that stage." "Denied? The loan-to-value ratio on your property is already maxed out, ma'am. There is no equity to borrow against. Your husband was informed." I hung up the phone. My blood ran cold. He had tried to steal the house. He had tried to borrow against the very asset I was meticulously paying for, and he'd done it behind my back, without my signature. He was going to set fire to the entire ship, with me in it, just to save himself. The bank hadn't denied him because of me. They'd denied him because he was already in too deep. The house, his great symbol of success, was worthless as collateral. I realized, with a sudden, chilling clarity, that Ms. Davenport's timeline was no longer viable. Let him dig was no longer an option. He wasn't digging. He was planting dynamite. The time was up. He was preparing to pull us both down, and I had to move before he lit the fuse, before I could act. I had to understand the full picture. This man, Julian, he was the root of the rot. He was the one who had received my $15,000. He was the one applying the pressure that was causing Marcus to try and fraudulently leverage our house. I had to know who he was. I'd already searched for a romantic connection. I had scoured Marcus's secret emails, his texts. I found nothing. No hotel reservations, no dinner plans, no fawning, emotional messages. The relationship was purely financial, which, in a way, was far worse. A love affair. I could understand. This was a pathology. I hired a private investigator, using the Terra Nova account, not for surveillance, but for a deep financial and background check on Julian Anson. The report came back 48 hours later, and it was pathetic. Julian wasn't a high finance guru. He wasn't a partner at some shadowy firm. He was a lifestyle consultant and a serial entrepreneur. He had a slick website full of stock photos of private jets and vague platitudes about unlocking your potential and alpha mindset investing. He had no credentials. He had a string of failed LLCs, 2 bankruptcies, and a small claims court record as long as my arm. He was a sophisticated, small-time con artist. The truth was, Julian was a grifter who preyed on insecure men with money, men like Marcus. And I finally understood. Marcus, who built his entire identity on being the smartest man in the room, the provider, the high-powered executive. Deep down, he was terrified he was a fraud. He was terrified that his success was just luck, that he wasn't as brilliant as he pretended. He hadn't met a partner in Julian. He had met a savior. Julian was the undiscovered genius who saw Marcus's true potential. Julian was the one who could take Marcus's conventional success and turn it into something truly legendary. Julian was the validation Marcus craved, the yes man who told him he was an alpha, a titan, a king, and this king was being bled dry. The keylogger transcripts, cross-referenced with the P.I. report, told the whole story. Julian was draining Marcus with an endless series of can't-miss startup ideas. A ghost kitchen concept for AI-generated food. A new cryptocurrency based on I couldn't even understand it. It was so nonsensical, valueless, high-concept garbage. Marcus wasn't just conning me, he was being conned himself by a cheaper, more desperate version of the same predator. He was the bigger fish, being devoured by a remora he'd mistaken for a pilot fish. The contempt I felt for him was almost suffocating, mingled with a sliver of pity so thin it was sharp. The twist, the final piece of evidence I needed, came at an art fundraiser I attended 2 nights later. Terra Nova was now successful enough that I had begun anonymous philanthropic giving. I was a bronze sponsor of the Denver Art Museum's contemporary exhibit. I was attending as Eliza, Marcus's wife, but I was there as Terra Nova's founder. The ballroom was glittering. People were drinking champagne that cost $500 a bottle. And across the room, near the silent auction, I saw him, Julian. He was wearing a tuxedo that was trying too hard, a little too shiny, a little too tight. He was holding a flute of champagne, gesticulating wildly, his face alight with predatory charm, and he was cornering Gregory Sallow, one of the oldest and most respected real estate developers in the city. Marcus was nowhere to be seen. He was probably at home, trying to figure out how to sell my car. I felt a gravitational pull. I picked up a fresh glass of champagne and drifted toward them, staying just out of earshot, pretending to study a hideous piece of sculpture. Julian was in full flow. I could hear snippets of the pitch. Not just a kitchen, it's a content delivery system. Ground floor opportunity. Aggressive Q3 projections. He was using the exact same script, the same buzzwords, that I had read in Marcus's emails. He was trying to land a whale. Sallow, a man who had not gotten rich by being stupid, was looking at Julian with an expression of polite, bored skepticism. I waited for Sallow to disengage, which he did, with a firm, practiced ease. Fascinating, Julian. I'll have my people look at it. Julian was left alone, his smile faltering for a second. I made my move. "Excuse me," I said, stepping into his line of sight. My voice was warm, a little breathless. my eyes wide with interest. "I'm so sorry. I couldn't help but overhear. Are you in tech?" His eyes snapped to me. He scanned me from head to toe, taking in the designer dress paid for by Terra Nova and the diamonds, a family heirloom he would mistake for Marcus's generosity. He saw what he wanted to see: another rich, bored wife. "In a manner of speaking," he said, his smile clicking back into place, brighter now. "I'm a venture strategist. I connect disruptive ideas with forward-thinking capital." "That sounds incredible," I said. "I've always been so interested in the startup world. My husband," I gave a little dismissive shrug, "he's so traditional, all stocks and bonds. He just doesn't understand vision." Julian's eyes lit up. He had found his mark. "Vision is everything," he said, leaning in. "Without vision, there is no future." "That's exactly it," I said. "I've been looking for something of my own, a passion project, something with real vision." We talked for 10 minutes. By the end, he was practically eating out of my hand. "You know, Julian," I said, placing a hand gently on his arm, "I would love to see a prospectus, if you have one, just for me to look at, of course." "Absolutely," he said, his voice slick. He was already spending my money. He pulled a thick, embossed business card from his pocket and from his briefcase, a glossy, bound summary of the Ghost Kitchen AI project, the exact same one Marcus had already poured $50,000 into. "I'll be discreet," I said, tucking the card and the summary into my purse. "It was a pleasure to meet you." "The pleasure was all mine. Eliza," I said, smiling. "Just Eliza." I turned and walked away, my heart hammering, not with fear, but with triumph. I had his card. I had his fraudulent project summary. I had the final nail. I glanced back. Across the ballroom, just walking in the door with a desperate, hunted look on his face, was my husband. He was clearly here to find Julian. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on his partner. He saw Julian, but he didn't see me. I was standing 10 feet away, in plain sight, holding the proof of his entire financial implosion in my clutch. And he looked right through me. Marcus met Julian at the art gala. I watched them from across the room, a frantic, huddled conversation near an exit. Marcus looked pale. Julian looked angry. The next morning, Marcus was a whirlwind of false efficiency. "Babe, good news," he said, throwing shirts into a suitcase. He wouldn't look at me. "The Singapore deal, it's back on. I have to fly out tonight. It's a quick trip. 48 hours. Max. This is it. This is the one that solves everything." He was lying. I knew from the keylogger he wasn't going to Singapore on business. He was going to meet a private lender, a loan shark, who demanded an in-person meeting. He was trying to find a new source of capital to pay off Julian. He was flying across the world to dig his hole even deeper. "That's wonderful. Marcus," I said, handing him a pair of rolled socks. "You've been working so hard. I hope this is the big win you deserve." He kissed me at the door. It was a dry, brittle kiss. "Keep the home fires burning," he said. "And be smart about the joint card. I'm serious. Eliza, we're on the edge." "I will," I said, adjusting his tie. "I'll be right here." The front door clicked shut. I watched the Uber pull away. I counted to 60, just to be sure. Then, I moved. This was not a drill. It was an extraction. I went to my office, and the woman who had been Eliza, the passive wife, evaporated. The CEO took her place. My first call was to Ms. Davenport. "He's airborne," I said. "Singapore. He'll be in the air for at least 15 hours. "Go," she said. "The team is standing by." I executed the plan. First, I logged into the Terra Nova portal and initiated the final transfer, moving the last of the operational cash into the newly formed irrevocable trust, the one Ms. Davenport had established under a name so bland and anonymous it was untraceable. My phone rang. It was Davenport's senior paralegal. "We are filing the IP transfer now," he said. "Terra Nova's intellectual property, brand assets, and domain registry are now the property of the trust. As of 2 minutes ago, your LLC is a legally empty shell. Next, the firewalls. I changed every password. Banking, logistics, supplier portals, hosting, email. Every digital door was locked, and the keys were changed. Then, I turned to the house. I opened the joint account online, the account Marcus used. I looked at the balance. It was lower than I expected. He must have been pulling cash from it. I did the math. I calculated exactly 50%, down to the cent. My 50%. I transferred it to a new, private account under my name. I left his half. I was not a thief. I was precise. My final call was to the top real estate agent in Cherry Creek, a woman I'd already vetted. "It's Eliza," I said. "We're ready to move. I need you here, this afternoon, for a private consultation. We're preparing for a quiet, off-market sale." I was dismantling my life, and our shared life, with the cold, efficient precision of a demolition crew. By the time Marcus's plane touched down in Asia, his entire financial world, the one he thought he controlled, would be a facade. I was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters, a habit I couldn't break, when my personal cell phone rang. Not the house phone. It was an unknown number. I answered, my voice calm. "This is Eliza. Ms. Eliza." The voice was professional, female, and carried an uncomfortable weight. "My name is Sarah Chen. I'm calling from the Human Resources Department at Bridgeline Partners." My heart didn't stop, but it gave a hard, painful kick. "Yes. I apologize for the cold call. Ma'am, we're trying to reach your husband, Marcus, but his phone is going straight to voicemail." "He's on a flight," I said, my voice perfectly neutral. "A business trip." "Ah." A pause. "I see. Well, ma'am, this is a somewhat sensitive matter. We are currently conducting an internal audit of several client accounts managed by Marcus." "An audit?" I let my voice fill with the appropriate amount of wifely confusion. Is there a problem?" The woman's voice became steel. "We have found several significant irregularities. Specifically, large fund transfers to an unvetted third-party vendor, a Julian Anson, which appear to be in direct violation of the firm's client fund management protocols." I said nothing. I just listened. "Ma'am," she continued, "as part of this audit, we are required to ask, are you aware of any outside business accounts, any LLCs or private holdings, that Marcus may have, which are not on his standard disclosures?" The question hung in the air. This was the moment. I had the power to expose him or to protect him. I chose to do neither. I chose the truth. I'm not sure I understand," I said, my voice trembling just enough. "A business account. Goodness, no. Marcus handles all of that. I have our joint checking account. And," I paused, then gave a small, embarrassed laugh. "And what, ma'am?" she asked, her tone sharpening. "It's silly," I said. "It's not a real, I have my little online shop. My Etsy store. Just a hobby. It barely makes a profit, to be honest. It's just something to keep me busy." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her typing. "An Etsy shop," she repeated, her voice flat. "I see. And you have no knowledge of any other accounts or entities, anything related to a Julian Anson?" "Julian," I said, my voice a perfect echo of confusion. "I think I've heard Marcus mention his name. A new partner. Maybe I'm so sorry. I wish I could be more help. I'm not really involved in that side of his life." "Very well," Ms. Chen said. The ice was back. "Thank you for your time. Ms. Eliza, we will be in touch." The line clicked dead. I put the phone down on the cold granite countertop. I had just, in the most technically honest way possible, confirmed their darkest suspicions. I had told them he had nowhere else to hide money. I had painted the exact picture he himself had spent a decade painting, that I was an airhead, a non-entity, a woman with a hobby who knew nothing. By confirming my own worthlessness, I had given them the rope. I knew, with absolute certainty. They were now pulling the noose tight. The call came at 3 a.m. I was awake, sitting in the dark of the living room, watching the city lights. I knew it was him before I even saw the Singapore country code light up the screen. I let it ring 3 times, then answered. My voice was sleepy, soft. "Marcus, is everything okay? It's the middle of the night." "You," he hissed. The word was not a greeting. It was an accusation, choked with panic and static. "What did you do, Eliza? What the hell did you say to them?" I sat up, feigning confusion. "What are you talking about? Who I was asleep?" "Bridgeline," he shouted, his voice cracking. "HR Sarah Chin. They called me Eliza. They called me while I was in a layover in Tokyo. They've suspended me. Suspended me. Suspended." I kept my voice a perfect, naive whisper. "Marcus, that's terrible." "Why, what happened?" "What happened is you ruined me," he roared. "They were asking about Julian, about the accounts. They must have talked to you. You must have said something. You destroyed everything." "Marcus, I barely said anything," I said, my voice calm, cool, and suddenly very, very awake. "I told them I didn't know anything about your business. I thought I was helping you. I thought you were in a meeting." The shift in my tone, the lack of my usual fluttering panic, must have registered. There was a pause. I heard him take a ragged breath. The anger collapsed, replaced by a raw, naked terror. "Eliza," he whimpered. "Oh, God, Eliza, you don't understand. Then make me understand. Marcus." And he did. It all came out, a pathetic, frantic confession. The deal with Julian wasn't a deal. It was a disaster. The client funds, he'd borrowed them, just for a few weeks, to cover the margin. But the investment failed. Julian was in debt, which meant he was in debt. The audit. They were going to find everything. He was ruined. He was going to be disbarred. He might go to jail. "They've frozen everything," he sobbed, the full weight of it finally hitting him. "My accounts, my company card. I'm stuck here. Eliza, I'm in Singapore, and I can't even pay my hotel bill." He was crying now, the great, powerful Marcus, crying into a phone, halfway across the world. Then, the inevitable pivot. "Your money," he said, his voice suddenly brightening with a desperate new hope. "Eliza, your shop, your savings, the $15,000, you still have it, right? I know I told you I invested it, but I can get it back." He was lying, even now. "Eliza, I need that money," he pleaded. "I need it to hire a lawyer, a good one, just to tide me over until I can fix this. You have to help me. You're my wife. You have to send it to me. Right now." I waited. I let the silence stretch, thick and heavy, across the thousands of miles of ocean and fiber optics. "Marcus," I said, my voice as flat and cold as the glass window in front of me. "You took that money 6 months ago." More silence. This was not the silence of a bad connection. It was the sound of a man running at full speed into a solid brick wall. "You told me it was a sure thing," I continued, my voice mercilessly clear. "You said you were investing it, but you didn't. Did you? You wired it to Julian, the very next day, to pay your gambling debts. I know." The air went out of him. I heard a sound, a short, sharp gasp. He had forgotten. In his all-consuming panic, he had forgotten the lie he'd told me, the money he had already stolen. He had no cards left to play, except one, the last one. "The house," he said, his voice a low, desperate growl. The despair was gone, replaced by a new, ugly fury. "We have to sell the house. Eliza." "No, Marcus," I said simply. "What do you mean, no?" he snapped. "We sell the house. We use the equity to pay back Bridgeline, to pay Julian. It's the only way." "I don't think that's a good idea, Marcus." And then, the mask was completely gone. The desperate husband, the panicked executive, all of it vanished, replaced by the tyrant I'd lived with for 10 years. "I don't care what you think," he roared, his voice so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "It's not your decision. It's my house. Do you hear me? My house, I paid for it. I paid for everything I'm calling a realtor from this hotel, and I'm selling it, with or without you." I listened to him rave, to him threaten, to him list all the things he had bought, all the things he owned, when he finally ran out of air. I spoke, my voice barely above a whisper, but I knew he could hear it. "Actually, Marcus," I said, "you can't." I hung up. He must have borrowed money for a plane ticket. He arrived 2 days later, not in a town car, but in a crumpled taxi. He hadn't just been suspended. I could see from the way he walked. A man, hollowed out and running on fumes, that he was utterly broken. He burst through the front door, his face a mask of gray fatigue and rage. "Eliza!" he bellowed. "We are selling this house, and we are—" He stopped. His parents were sitting on one of the white Italian sofas. My parents were sitting on the other. They all looked horrified, uncomfortable, and deeply disappointed. My mother, a woman who had always been dazzled by Marcus's success, looked at me with pity. "Eliza, honey," she'd said an hour before, "whatever you've done, you need to fix it. This man has given you everything." Marcus's eyes darted from his parents to mine, and then to me. I was standing by the fireplace, wearing a simple black dress. I had been waiting. He, the master performer, saw his audience. The script flipped. The panic vanished, replaced by a wounded, righteous indignation. This was not a man who had been suspended for fraud. This was a man betrayed by his family. He had called them. This was his ambush. This was his intervention. "Thank God you're all here," he said, his voice thick with false emotion. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. I'm so glad you could make it. I need you to talk to her." He pointed at me. "I'm trying to save this family. I'm trying to hold together everything we've built. And she," his voice broke, a masterful touch, "she is letting us fall apart, all for some silly little project." He began to pace, the picture of a tortured provider. "Eliza is not understanding the severity of the situation. I'm facing a temporary setback at work, a political thing, and she is selfishly clinging to her hobby. She's sitting on savings, and she refuses to help. She would rather see us lose this house than contribute." My own father, who had never once asked me about my life, cleared his throat. "Eliza, this isn't a game." But it was Marcus's father, a man forged from the same steel as his son, who delivered the killing blow. He stood up, his face a mask of stern disappointment, and looked at me as if I were a failed investment. "Daughter," he said, his voice a low rumble, "we have all been very patient with your little endeavors, but this is the real world. Your husband is in trouble. It is time for you to stop playing pretend and support the man who has given you this life." The room was silent. All 4 of them stared at me, their faces a united front of condemnation. Marcus stood by the window, his arms crossed, the martyred king. I stood up. The click of my heels on the concrete floor was the only sound. "Dad, Mom, Mr. and Mrs." I said, my voice cutting through the heavy silence, perfectly calm, perfectly clear. "Marcus, I'm so glad you are all here. It's true. There are some things you all should know." I walked to the coffee table. On it was a stack of 5 thin document folders. I picked them up. "You're right, Marcus," I said, turning to him. "The situation is severe." I handed the first folder to my father, the second to my mother, the third and fourth to his parents. I saved the last one for him. He snatched it from my hand. "What is this?" he spat. "Divorce papers you're trying to leave me now. Now." "Read it," I said. My mother's hand went to her mouth. His father's face, so sure a moment ago, turned a blotchy, confused red. "Eliza," my father whispered. "What? What is this notice of default?" Marcus was staring at his copy. His face had gone from gray to a dead, waxy white. "It's not divorce papers, Marcus," I explained, my voice light, conversational, as if explaining a dinner menu. "It's a foreclosure notice." "Foreclosure," his mother whispered, the word alien in this $1,000,000 room. "Yes," I said. "It seems Marcus, the man who pays for everything, missed his first mortgage payment last month, a temporary setback, and the bank was very concerned, so I had a conversation with them. The twist, the real one. You see," I continued, "the bank was looking at his other debts, the audit at Bridgeline. They were ready to seize the asset. They just wanted to cut their losses. So I made them an offer." I turned to Marcus. He was shaking his head, a low, strangled sound coming from his throat. "I bought the debt," I said. "Through a shell company, of course. I bought the note. The bank was so happy to get rid of it, they gave me a 20% discount. I am the bank. Marcus." Marcus just stared at me, his mind clearly unable to process the words. Then, he did the only thing he knew how to do. He scoffed, a dry, rattling sound. "Bought it," he said, his voice a desperate, cracking sneer. "Bought it with what your necklace money, the $50 you made selling?" "Selling bracelets." He was still laughing, a high-pitched, hysterical sound, when the doorbell rang. The sound was sharp, final. Marcus flinched. The parents looked at the door, terrified. I smiled. "No, Marcus," I said, walking toward the door. "Not with my necklace money." "With my money." I opened the door. Ms. Davenport stood on the threshold, not in her office attire, but in a severe dark gray suit. She looked like a general. Beside her stood 2 tall men in identical navy suits, carrying briefcases. They were not appraisers. They were legal representatives, witnesses. They stepped inside. The air in the room, already suffocating, became thin. Marcus saw them, and the last shred of his composure tore apart. He lunged forward, not at me, but at the men. "Get out!" he screamed, his face contorted. "Get out of my house! You can't do this, Eliza. You can't do this. This is my house. Ms. Davenport didn't flinch. She simply looked at him, her expression one of utter boredom. "Actually, Mr. she said, her voice cutting through his hysteria like a shard of ice. "It is not. This property, as of 90 minutes ago, is the sole asset of the Terra Nova Trust, and as you are no longer a resident, you are, in fact, trespassing." His parents and my parents looked at each other, completely, utterly lost. "Terra Nova," his father stammered, looking at the foreclosure papers. "What is Terra Nova? What is this?" Marcus was shaking his head, mumbling. No, it's a mistake." All eyes in the room finally turned to me. The invisible wife, the quiet one, the fool. I picked up the remote for the 85-inch television, the one Marcus had bought to watch the game. "It's my little Etsy shop." "Marcus," I said, my voice quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. I turned on the television. The screen flickered to life, not with a football game, but with the clean, professional dashboard of a business portal. My business portal. I clicked to the main summary page. On the screen, in letters 4 inches high, was the company name Terra Nova Collective. Beside it, I had the dashboard widgets open. I clicked on Press. Anonymous articles from design and business journals appeared, praising the mysterious but brilliant new brand that was dominating the sustainable textile market. Then, I clicked the last tab, the one marked Finance. I had the main balance sheet pulled up. The numbers were stark, black and white. Total liquid assets, $3,104,500. The room went dead silent. I heard a thud. Marcus's father had dropped his folder, the foreclosure papers scattering across the concrete floor. My mother's mouth was open, her eyes fixed on the screen. Marcus just stared. He looked from the number, to me, and back to the number. The color drained from his face, leaving only a sickly, yellow-white. He didn't understand. So I explained. I built it, I said, my voice never rising. I started it 5 years ago, with the $50,000 from Aunt Clara that you called pocket change. I built it from my office, the tiny room you gave me. I built it on the nights you were working late, and the weekends you were playing golf. I built it while you were laughing at me at dinner parties, while you called me cute, while you mocked me for not having a real job. I turned from the screen and looked at him. You're right about one thing. Marcus, you're not just broke, you're a criminal. I walked over to Miss Davenport's associates. One of them opened his briefcase and handed me a final single-page document. I walked back to my husband and held it out to him. You committed fraud when you took $15,000 from me and gave it to Julian. I have the wire transfers. I have your emails. I have the keylogger transcripts. That's a felony. You also committed felony bank fraud when you tried to take out a second mortgage on this house without my signature, an asset you didn't even fully own. He flinched. He hadn't known I knew that. Ms. Davenport has prepared a full criminal complaint. It's ready to be filed. I held the paper out, closer to him. He was breathing in short, shallow gasps. Or, I said, you can sign this. He looked at the paper. It wasn't a criminal complaint. It was a separation agreement. This is a non-negotiable, uncontested divorce settlement, I said, my voice as cold as Ms. Davenport's. It states that you waive any and all claims to this house, to the Terra Nova Trust, and to any and all of my assets. It states that you will leave this property within 24 hours. You will take your personal effects, your debts, and your Audi, which, by the way, is scheduled to be repossessed on Monday. Bridgeline's audit is the least of your problems. He just stared at the paper. His father started to say something. Now, Eliza. Be quiet, I said, not even looking at him. He was silent. I looked back at Marcus. Sign it, and I will not file the criminal charges. I will not personally hand Julian's fraudulent prospectus or your emails to the district attorney. You will walk away, broke, humiliated, but free. It's more than you deserve. He looked at me, his eyes finally seeing me. He wasn't seeing his wife. He wasn't seeing his cute little dependent. He was seeing the person who held his entire life in her hands. He knew he had no choice. He knew he was beaten. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely take the pen from me. He leaned against the wall he thought was his, and signed his name, a jagged, broken scrawl. He slid to the floor, the paper in his hand. The story ends there, with him, surrounded by the family that had worshipped his success, staring at a $3 million number on a screen. His arrogance, his entire life's foundation, had shattered into dust. He finally realized that the woman he'd held in contempt, the woman he'd dismissed, was the only truly successful person in the room. Thank you for listening to this story. Please let us know in the comments where you are listening from to connect and share your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and support us further by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.